From the NFL Podcast. Got benched for a dude named Doug.
Welcome to another edition of the Around the NFL Podcast presented by the United States Marine Corps. My name is Dan Hanzus, coming to you from a room filled with heroes. Marc Sessler, Chris Wesseling, and Gregg Rosenthal. What is up, boys?
Hey, Dan.
Just talking about it. Without getting into details, we had a nice newsroom conversation downstairs, the four of us, the great handsome Hank, another prominent figure in the NFL media landscape, about a feud that this figure was involved with, based on some podcast comments and then some Twitter back and forth.
Why are we, going around? We were defending Scott Hansen's honors because Michael Lombardi took an unprovoked shot at him on Twitter, which I didn't know all about. Well, we're not
I don't
saying
want to betray
we weren't involved.
Scott's
I found
confidence.
out about it. Yeah, we don't need to get into the conversation, but we were just catching up on that. These two individuals
There's beef.
had a feud,
A
and
media tiff.
we're clearly on Team Hansen. That's all I'm saying.
Forget about it. And then, just talking about, it is my desire for us to enter into a proper feud with someone else in the media landscape. Lombardi is a nice choice, but Scott's already got that. So, who is someone that we can feud with? And I think that not only would that spike ratings, but it would just kind of spice things up a little bit. It's just some real bad blood.
Well, you guys are a big fan of this Will Brinson guy, but I'm kind of sick of the way he operates.
We love Brinson.
Way to clarify that, Wes.
Hey, there might be some listeners in Ireland who think we have beef with Brinson.
I do not need more Twitter in my life. That's my one issue with this. Is that you get tangled with Barstool
Understood.
or someone, then it's like your mentions are on fire for the next 3 weeks.
yeah.
I don't need
Yeah, I have enough
Yeah.
natural feuds that arise. I don't need to manufacture one.
I just
Let's
think what
see
the
comes
four
along.
of you guys were saying sickeningly about Judy Batista before we started was pretty gross. I mean, that's
Well, yeah.
No, I was going through my DMs.
Incorrect, Eric.
I knew we had there was a mini feud with a beat writer up in Cleveland about 5 years ago, and we had the beat writer on the show, but I can't remember.
so many that
what
we
it was
don't even
about.
remember the details of that.
I don't
feud,
remember
so.
what that one was about. There's been heat here and there. Remember, there's Pat McAfee got fired up once. That who was the punter for the Raiders? That was
Marquette King.
outshining McAfee in terms of punter swag. And there was a Around the NFL post that I wrote naming Marquette King the coolest punter in the league, and McAfee got upset about that. But this is all small potatoes. What I'm looking for is something
Okay.
something that makes waves, something that puts us in the Sports Business Journal. Awful announcing. If there was a dead spin,
It's
need something like
Sports Radio 101, but I feel like we've graduated beyond manufacturing.
But Greg, you mentioned Mike Francesa. That would
yeah, I
hurt.
wouldn't do
That would
that.
hurt
Oh,
the
never.
young child in me
Right.
that grew up listening to him. But that would be a bigger fish.
But he's one of the guys that, if you grew up listening to radio, people come at him and he'd say things like, "Don't bring a pea shooter to a gun."
Right.
Like,
And at this
I want to
point-
be in that situation.
At this point, he's embracing that he barely follows sports and then makes opinions about it. He makes that obvious to everyone.
But it would be essentially one media figure versus the four of us, and Eric could come in with some heat too. That's a
or
lot
another
to
podcast.
take
you know,
on.
You don't want none of Erica.
Or another podcast.
We could feud with the broadcast. How would that go for us?
terrible.
Oh,
Anyway, so we'll work on this. And Greg does make a good point. One of Greg's gifts is that he does seem to get someone mad at him every, 5 to 7 weeks or so. There's some type of thing that pops up where someone gets annoyed with Greg, or you say something that rubs someone the wrong way. What we might be able to do is just organically roll with that, and whatever Greg does, side with Greg, and then pour some kerosene on whatever the.
it is a gift.
Dan's like, well, for once we'll side with Greg, and then we'll get in the mix here.
I do. One of my favorite feuds ever, of course, was we'll bleep the name out.
No, why are you doing this?
In the newsroom, Greg and this gentleman just went off on each other.
That was very juicy.
That's not true.
Wasn't even
All-time
my
best.
favorite Greg feud.
I did not
Really?
go off.
Brent Grimes' wife.
oh,
Miko
Miko.
Grimes.
Oh yeah.
That's another great one. But that one was. First of all, I would never get involved in that feud.
No.
I'm staying out of
It'd be
that.
like getting
any
Marvin
Miko
Harrison's record.
related feud. But the one with this individual in the newsroom led to this individual saying to Greg, set up a debate time about Kenny Stills, and I will debate you why Kenny Stills is a great wide receiver. And Greg was like, no, why would anyone do that? Which was a good answer.
It was going to be like the shootout at the OK Corral of statistical football arguments.
Greg's answer was it was accurate. He was like, why would anyone want to watch that?
Very niche.
And then that guy stormed out of the room. And then a manager a shadowy league figure said, both of you, and put them both in his office for a double
You're getting
talking
so many
to.
details wrong here.
Well,
So many details.
right?
I didn't go in any office. The other guy didn't storm out. He was escorted out. But
All right.
I just
Because of that fight?
I stayed in my seat.
It was fun to see.
So anyway, we're well equipped to start a feud and to maintain one. So I'm looking forward to it. Today's show is a good one. Oh, Ricky, let's set the appropriate. We want an epic feel to this because I love end of decade, end of year retrospectives, and yes, the Christopher Peter Wesseling, Richard Wesseling,
Robert
Wesseling's NFL All-Decade Team.
What an honor.
Which is a mega banger that will be dropping later this week, but we will get a sneak preview and maybe get involved with the discussion. Maybe even, Mark, big stage for you in a big spot, sway Wes on some of his
I feel like the right person to get into that with Chris Bobby Wesseling.
Chris Bob.
Also, so we'll go through that. Also, we're going to go into the news. We just found out that a coach that's on the hot seat is hopping off. His butt's feeling nice and chilly. And then some prominent waiver additions for contenders, a suspension, and more Browns drama. A lot to get to. But before any of that, history made in the Superdome on Monday night. Let's dig in.
12th play of the drive. First and goal from the 5. Brees under center I formation. Fakes the handoff. Looks to throw. Wide open. Touchdown! Josh Hill. 19 years. 273 games. Over 76,000 yards. And now 540 touchdowns. Drew Brees, take a bow.
Zach Streif, the Saints Radio Network, with the call. Yes, history made in the Superdome, and Drew Brees at the center of it. The legendary quarterback threw 4 touchdown passes, passing Peyton Manning for the all-time record. Manning had been at 539, and Brees threw 4. He's up to 542. And while he was there, why not? Drew Brees decides to go 29 of 30 against the hapless Colts, setting the all-time single-game mark for accuracy at 96.7%. Yes, 29 for 30, 307 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, 10.2 yards per attempt. Oh, and by the way, Michael Thomas, 12 catches for 128 and a touch on 12 targets. Near perfection for the Saints, 34-7 over the Colts. Oh, they almost pitched a shutout too. Mark, back from Oakland, you got to dig in on some Week 15 football before it was all said and done. Tell me your experience watching Drew Brees make history.
Coming off of the hideous loss to the Niners, where you come out with so many questions about the Saints defense and what that means, and there's these lingering questions about Drew Brees and where he's at right now, arm strength and all this other stuff. It was just one of these sort of classic. I mean, the Colts just felt like the Washington Generals last night. They couldn't get anything done. And the Saints scripted the most perfect bounce-back victory that you could imagine, and hanging around in a totally high-octane NFC that I think we're going to look at what we are setting up for the greatest NFC playoffs of our time together, I would imagine. If it all plays out that way, well, of course, it's not going to, there would be surprises. But the Saints are kind of saying, we are right there with the rest of them. We're right there, and Brees, I thought the way he played took away some concerns for me about their offense too.
Well, this combined with a week ago, because it was just as impressive, if not more, to put that performance up against the 49ers. They had a very good one against the Panthers defense at home too about a month ago, then some down weeks. But the fact that they are peaking right now offensively makes me feel a lot more confident about their playoff chances because they're an offensive team. I know it's a good defense. All these defenses are good, but they're not going to – I don't think any of these defenses are going to dominate on another offense's best day. And we're seeing that the Saints have a little bit of that early 2018 or certainly any time before that juice to them where they know where the receivers are going to be. Brees was obviously on time, on rhythm, and Michael Thomas is playing as well as any wide receiver we've ever seen.
Brees has generally looked fantastic since his return from the thumb injury. He's moving well in the pocket, a couple of great performances in a row. And you've got, like you said, Michael Thomas is an MVP candidate. Jared Cook is now entrenched as that third guy we begged him to become. Latavius Murray's been a good power back. The O-line is solid. Taysom Hill's a gadget guy. You even have Deontay Harris to throw into the mix once in a while. Alvin Kamara is why are you running like Devontae Freeman?
He's the one guy. He just is. It doesn't. He's not getting the ball in space the way he did last year, and when he's getting the ball, he's not doing the special things.
You even see the frustrated look on his face after a play when he didn't force a defender to miss him on a tackle because he's used to being that guy, and he just can't do it right now.
Well, I do think they have concerns. First of all, they lost 2 defensive line starters. That didn't show up against the Colts. Second, they lost Larry Warford, their Pro Bowl guard, to an injury which looked like it might have been serious, and they're missing their other Pro Bowl guard who might be back to the mix soon, at least certainly for the playoffs. So that's a concern that they have some injuries, but otherwise they have to feel better, I think, right now than any time of the year. And you should give that completion record to Michael Thomas. I mean, Drew Brees was amazing. He was perfect, but some of the catches that Thomas made, there's actually a stat.
I believe it was 64.5% was the catch expectancy of his 12 receptions, and he caught every single one.
Right. There's a stat. Yeah.
Next gen.
Seth Walder of saying, how much over expected that you would, have whether you would completion, and he had the highest mark in a single game in 3 years.
I mean, if we assume
that you would have expected 2 to 3, 4 of those passes to be incomplete, and he made plays on them, which has been happening all year.
If we assume Lamar gets MVP, barring him being, swept away
abducted by aliens.
Yeah, something more earthbound.
They'd still probably give it to him because it would be a mass tragedy if he was taken away.
That's true, because
They're
he
not going to
wouldn't
take the trophy away from him.
That's a good
right.
point.
He wouldn't have filed a
His
bad
family
game.
is going to want the trophy.
How about Michael Thomas for Offensive Player of the Year, though?
Sure.
I mean, I understand it's probably just going to go to Russell Wilson, but
it'll probably just
That
go
would
to
be my
Lamar
vote
Jackson.
anyway,
I don't like Offensive Player of the Year, and I bet more times than not it just goes to the same guy getting both awards. It's a
really?
weird,
I feel like they always
it's a
split
weird
it up.
award.
They usually
Todd
split
Gurley
it, though,
won
I
it.
think. If it's
Yeah.
a close race and they want to give the runner-up a consolation prize, they give him the OPOY, as they
Last
call it.
year they did not, right?
I don't
Well,
know.
I mean, this is your hill, Greg.
All right, I'll give you a perfect example. Peyton
refuse.
Manning and Adrian Peterson
Right,
had historic seasons in 2012. They gave Adrian Peterson MVP, and they said, Peyton, take your 55 touchdowns and
Well,
enjoy your-
we've said it 100 times. It's Best Picture and Best Director, and they find a way to reward 2, willing
But
subjects.
can we just take a step back and truly appreciate Drew Brees, honestly? And I know it's happening in all corners, but maybe we don't always talk about Brees the way we talk about these other greats, whether it's Peyton Manning and Tom Brady. And Brees has always been maybe a step behind in the shadows of those guys in this era. But now you take a step back. He's got the 1 ring. He could really use a second ring, but he's got the all-time touchdown record, and maybe Brady catches him. Who knows? But he's got the yardage record.
Brady needs a couple on Saturday to pass him. I doubt they'll do any ceremony, and then Brees will pass him back on Sunday.
He's 3 behind, I believe. He needs, and I don't know if Brady's got 3 more touchdowns in him. Completion percentage record. He is this guy that's stacking up numbers that are godlike, and he's been doing it forever. He's 40 years old. He went 29 of 30 last night at 40 years old. Brady gets all the shine for being the old quarterback. Brees is doing the same thing a couple of years behind him.
I liked that on the same night he did get the single game completion record because there's so much noise in the career records. You've played through 3 passing revolutions in your career. There's never been a better time to pass. There's never been a better stadium to pass in. There's rarely been a better play caller to play quarterback under. You've rarely been injured. He's checked all these boxes that would say, yes, of course you've got these career marks. But I think what stands out about him is the accuracy, that he's probably the most accurate quarterback of all time. And that in the time we've done this podcast, we've talked about another accurate quarterback like Phillip Rivers. Why are you always going through these stretches where you're turning the ball over and your offense doesn't work?
Right.
Tom Brady goes through slumps. Aaron Rodgers goes through slumps. We try to figure out what's wrong with their offenses. We're never trying to figure out what's wrong with Drew Brees' offense.
Late last season.
Well, that was maybe an arm injury thing, maybe. But for the most part, Drew Brees has sailed along as a top 5 offense through his entire Saints career.
Ultra consistent.
He's going to break his own completion. If he qualifies with enough throws, he'll have broken the completion record for a season for 3 straight years. I mean, he started leading the league in yards back in 2006, and he's done it for many of the years since, often leads it in attempts. It's wild. He did have a stretch like 6-7 years ago where he led the league in interceptions, and then a couple years later he threw 17, and I remember thinking at the time, okay, Drew Brees is starting to decline. That was 2012 and 2014. It's like I think it was more of a factor of they had such a bad defense that he just had to take more chances. And you're right, you can't teach accuracy, and he might be the most accurate quarterback ever. And the Saints are adding pieces as they go. They claimed Janoris Jenkins on waivers, and Eli Apple, who's had a great season until the last 3 weeks, I think is going to get benched because he has not played well the last couple weeks. And here now let's just slide in another Giants cornerback.
Gotta get that Giants secondary back together.
Improve our secondary
down south.
I mean, Jenkins part of what started the unraveling of his Giants career, and it happened very quickly after he used like a ugly term to describe a fan that came after on Twitter. He's posting his own stats, pointing out that he's having a good year amidst this last place seasons for the Giants. But he's a knucklehead. I don't know. Is he a guy that you want on your team? I don't know.
I think it's a month-long rental and see where it takes you.
Is the Brees the best passer ever? Forget about quarterback.
I don't know how you judge that. Like, do you judge him against his peers? Or do you judge him with, like, the evolution? To me, Dan Marino's the best passer I've ever seen.
I would say,
and Aaron Rodgers is probably right there with him.
Right. The problem is, look, Brees can hit a lot of difficult touch throws over a zone, into small windows, but he doesn't have the wow factor of, like, the deep out 25 yards down the side. Like, he doesn't have okay, that's the best throw I've ever seen. It's more just, like, incredible accuracy, decision-making, touch, everything like that. But the fact that they won 17 possessions and they scored 14 of them during this 2-game stretch against competent enough defenses. This is not, a great 49ers defense and a pretty good Colts defense. They have not been bad this year. They've been in every game. I know they were embarrassing last night. Jacoby Brissett, couldn't shoot straight. He's been pretty bad since his injury. But this has been a good Colts team. For them to blow them out's impressive.
I feel like in Week 16, this is the first week of the season where I've thought, if you throw all the NFC teams into a Royal Rumble, the Saints probably are the last one standing in the ring as we enter Week 16. To me, they're the best team in the NFC at this moment.
And I like their chances of getting a bye and very possibly getting the 1 seed. I think the way that the schedule works out with the Seahawks and the 49ers playing, they're going to be rooting for the Seahawks to win that game because they have the tiebreak. The Packers-Vikings, they can jump back up.
I believe, because I was going through one of those playoff machines, which is not as accurate as dealing with the Gregg Rosenthal.
No, I messed up the other night with some basic stuff. I've totally fallen off.
Don't own up to that.
I believe that if the Saints win out and the NFC West eventual champion wins out, and they both finish 13-3, the Saints don't get that bye.
Well, it depends. It depends if it's a 3-way tie, because that would have a factor. If it's them and the Seahawks, I don't need to go to any calculator. They played them, and they lost to them. I mean, they beat them. So they have the tiebreaker. Saints got it with the Seahawks
at 13.
If it's a 3-team one, I think where the Packers win out, then I think they're in trouble.
The Packers have a superior conference record to New Orleans right now.
And we brought up Papa Shango last week. The Colts on Monday night, they were Barry Horowitz. They're the jobber whose job is to show up, take a beating, get paid, and go home.
Yep.
Pat yourself on the back.
This is now like an annual thing. Like the Washington Generals come in on Monday Night Football for Drew Brees to break records.
They were very efficient in that role. By the way, when we talk about the best passer, and I know, why does the name Eric Hipple not come up in that conversation? Did anyone watch him? I know Wes did back in the day.
Detroit Lions quarterback.
Yeah.
There's also the Blauhards have, I'm sure, a comment to make here.
He was the original Blau.
There we go.
I'm seeing a lot of
blow to pick Blau. That's what they say.
By the way, a lot of Peyton Manning or Drew Brees convo for whatever reason.
Peyton Manning was better. Come on.
I think you got it. You're becoming a victim of the moment. And Brees has a better longevity, so he's having this late career that Brady's also had.
How many MVPs does Brees have?
0, right?
Thank you.
But Peyton Manning, in terms of the streak and the peak, forget it.
We are one sandwich away, or one touchdown away from Taysom Hill towards a sandwich prop being triggered.
8
by the way.
quarters. You got 8 quarters to get it done.
I kind of liked it. It's coming right down to the wire.
I was
here, but
thinking
I think
maybe he's
happen.
going to start at quarterback if they didn't have to play, but that's not going to happen now. They're going to
know.
have a lot to play for.
One word on the Colts.
The Horowitzes?
The Jacoby Brissett Colts remind me a little bit of the Alex Smith Chiefs, where they're kind of boring to watch. They have a strong roster. They're run by a good front office. They have a good coach. But even if they stay healthy, which if that happened this year and if their field goal kicker made kicks, you might get a wild card or win the AFC South. But your ceiling is one playoff and done.
That's why Booger on the telecast is going on and on. This is the true franchise quarterback, and maybe you want that guy at QB, and I don't want to fall into that old trap, Wes. It's all about the quarterback, but is a Jake Brisket team one that's you can actually pin Super Bowl hopes on?
Well, the numbers say PFF has him 32nd. Most other numbers have him between 16 and the early 20s in stats across the board.
Right.
You have to factor in not having T.Y. Hilton for a while, losing Ebron, losing Chester Rogers, losing Paris Campbell,
Marlon Mack.
losing Marlon Mack for sketches.
He hasn't been accurate since the MCL injury, and he's not overly I would say that's his number one problem.
He's not accurate. He
career.
doesn't attack downfield, and it's hard to separate how his numbers from how good the play caller is.
I wouldn't be
he's
surprised.
Really good.
I wouldn't be surprised if they fire Matt Eberflus, their defensive coordinator, who's done a fine enough job. But
Wait, what?
His stock was very high just months ago.
I know, but they don't. First of all, it was Josh McDaniels' hire, which they decided to keep. And man, these defenses like the Cowboys and the Colts, who just run out the same sort of plan each time and don't change it up. When you play a guy like Drew Brees and you just get lit up, you got to be able to change what you do week to week.
Let's do some news.
Part of the thing I think that just makes me is I go into work every single day trying to earn my job that day. And, I would go in and make sure that my key card worked and I was in the building and I was okay. It's most of the reason why I don't leave the building, because they're going to have to throw me out, like I've said before. So.
All right, so you know the drill. Every Black Monday, 6 to 8 NFL coaches get fired. Matt Patricia of the Lions seemed like a guy that would be in the crosshairs coming off a second straight off-season for the Lions, finishing below 500. But the Lions announced Tuesday it will keep both Patricia and GM Bob Quinn in 2020. Lions owner Martha Firestone Ford. I mean, what a name.
Is that how she walks around using the middle name as part of her announcement title?
I would.
In our Nick Shook write-up on NFL.com.
I think yes is your answer. It
Martha?
might be her husband's name.
Spoke with her
She
once
kept
at
Ford,
What is more American than Firestone Ford?
It's part of 2 dynasties.
I mean, what's more Detroit than that?
Unbelievable. Anyway,
She's a badass.
here were her comments. We expect to be a playoff contender. That means playing meaningful games in December. Well, that's not the case for the Lions, and it's rarely been the case for 20 years now, more perhaps. So, Patricia, I think what happens here is they're looking at the season and saying, you know what? 6 weeks in, everybody was high on Patricia, saying the players are buying into his system. We're in the mix in a very difficult division, and then they started to fall off a little bit. Matt Stafford gets hurt. The backup gets hurt. Injuries all over the roster. The first-round pick, Hawkinson, is banged up.
Marvin Jones, Jermaine Jones, Kerryon Johnson, Mike Daniels. They trade Quandre Diggs.
And then there's the Diggs trade. And also, if Patricia's the defensive guy, it doesn't seem like he has a lot of pieces to work with. So it's like, is this on the coach? Bad organizations love to hit the reset button. That's what I figured was going to happen here. So I kind of credit the Lions for sticking this out for one more year. But I also understand the flip side of it. If you're a Lions fan, you're like, I don't like the vibe of this guy. I don't like that we're 2 years and non-relevant after Jimmy Caldwell gave us back-to-back 9-7s, which is paradise in Detroit.
An 11-5 year, 2 years before that.
What do you think, Mark? Where do you come down to this? Do you think it's the right decision?
The Lions are not, and it comes down to Firestorm Ford or whatever her name is.
Her name is Martha Firestone Ford.
Firestone Ford. I mean, I don't think that they're not typically a knee-jerk operation. They are one of the more patient front office ownership clubs where with Jim Caldwell, there was frustration that they were allowing Jim Caldwell.
Look at Matt Millen. Matt Millen was there forever.
Right.
So that's got 5 years and only one of them had a winning record.
So I think that it depends on what the relationship is, but Patricia came out pretty strongly and said, I get along with this owner. We talk all the time. There is a relationship that's strong here. So I don't have a problem with finding out what year 3 would be with Matt Patricia based on, just as you said, this litany of injuries and maladies and all this other stuff that's happened to them. He has been hamstrung. That said, I don't look at the front office and say, I see a clear direction with what the Lions are and what they want to be at this point.
I think last week when I was apoplectic about this game being lockable between the Bucs and Lions, you guys made the good point that they've been in every game. The players are trying, even with all of these injuries, playing so many second and third stringers, they're in games till the end, and I think that's probably what saved Matt Patricia's job.
I also think it's a reminder to start your coach and GM on the same page to begin with, because you had that 1 year where Bob Quinn didn't really want Jim Caldwell, and so now you're just 2 years into Patricia and you're thinking of making a change. But if you fired Patricia, you're probably firing Bob Quinn, and you're Martha Ford or whoever's making all of those decisions, the board starting totally over from scratch. And do you want to give up on that? I would rather, if I was her, see what happens with Quinn and Patricia, and basically this is your last chance, then try to start from scratch. Because here's the reality. You have a long track record of not being able to start over from scratch and doing it well. So try this.
An extensive track record.
All right. We'll see what happens with the Lions in the offseason. A lot of work to do. Moving on. All right. So two names. We talked about Janoris Jenkins, cut by the Giants, claimed by the Saints for some depth in their secondary, maybe a starting role. Another big name.
I bet he's starting. They're a little banged up too. They lost Chauncey Gardner-Johnson last night, who's been really good for them.
Another big name, Terrell Suggs, who of course made his name with the Ravens, former Defensive Player of the Year. Now 37 years old, signed a contract, 1-year deal with the Cardinals earlier this year. And in 13 games in Arizona, he had 5.5 sacks, 37 tackles, 4 forced fumbles, which is not, peak Suggs production, but pretty good for a late 30s pass rusher. So they cut ties with Suggs, and he does not make it through waivers. There had been talk that he wanted to reunite with the Ravens, but the Saints, Niners, and Seahawks all attempted to claim Suggs. He goes to the Chiefs, though, who also put in a claim. So he will report to the Chiefs, and he becomes a depth piece in their front seven. Wes, your thoughts on Suggs, what you saw from him chewing up that game tape like the tape dog that you are. Roof.
He's ageless. He's still, he's not to the point where he's consistent every week, but there's still games where he's blowing up running games and passing games as a pass rusher. And I don't think he's just the depth piece for the Chiefs. They lost Alex Okafor to a torn pectoral muscle just a couple of days ago. So he may be right there with Frank Clark as their two most important defensive ends.
Couldn't you see him making a huge play in January?
Yeah, and I think part of the strategy here was there is a need, but also don't allow him to fall further down the waiver chain to Baltimore, to New England. It's keeping him out of that other.
Does this mean the Ravens didn't put in a claim for him?
Well, they were lower on the
right.
list.
The logic, I believe, is this: they were 32nd out of 32 teams in the waiver claim. So if he got to them and it was clear that he wanted to play for them anyway, why even claim him? Because if he makes it through waivers, you just sign him to a cheaper contract or whatever.
Yeah, Suggs, he's played a lot. I would expect him to start. I would have expected him to rotate maybe with Okafor, but now that he's gone, that is a very thin position. I think he steps right in and starts for what's been a very good pass defense.
Did he ask for his release from the Cardinals?
It was a little confusing. They said it was a mutual decision, so something happened behind the scenes where.
It's funny. Why didn't you just sign with the Ravens anyway instead of deciding that you wanted to play the last leg of your career in your home state?
It could have also been like the Cardinals went to him and they said, look, we're going to start playing some younger guys now, and he didn't want to be part of that, and then so it just makes sense. Plus they saved some money. Which
Cardinals were willing to give him $7 million, maybe.
Right. The Ravens were shocked by losing Terrell Suggs. It was the one guy they had. It
was like a first day signing.
They were flummoxed. They were like, I can't believe Terrell Suggs did that.
Right.
He apparently wanted to start his movie production company, which I think he has, and all sorts of
Apparently
other
on
stuff.
hiatus.
Remember how concerned we were about the Ravens offseason when they were losing all these pieces?
It's true.
Yeah, I do remember that.
Bad news connected to the Seahawks. Josh Gordon banned from the NFL once again. The Seahawks announced that the wide receiver, who they claimed off waivers in November, was suspended indefinitely for violating the NFL policies on performance-enhancing substances and substances of abuse. So he got popped for two separate things here?
Yes.
That was the first time
My
he's ever been
goodness.
suspended for PEDs, I believe.
My God, Josh Gordon. Anyway, this is the 5th suspension in 8 years. He was suspended indefinitely just last December while a member of the Pats. He was conditionally reinstated in August, just in time for the start of this season. It didn't work out in New England, ended with Seattle. It seemed like one of those great Seattle moves where a guy kind of cleans up his act and becomes a playmaker. But Gordon obviously is dealing with these demons here, and he just can't shake it. And you can't – it's – if anybody's been connected to people that have had these struggles – You look at it and you hear like, oh, what is wrong with this guy? But it's so clear because he knows it. It's embarrassing to him that this is in the news cycle again. He can't help it. It's an addiction, and it's sad. And I wonder if this is it. If the NFL is finally going to decide, as talented as you are, you're still in your 20s, you just can't do it. You can't stay clean, and that's going to be the end of him.
I think the relationship he has with Roger Goodell will help him get back into the league if he wants to take these steps to do so. Just because I think Goodell.
Well, we've seen that 4 or 5 times before.
Right. I
so.
mean, we've.
I guess at what point do teams finally say we can't count on?
Well, I
this
think that's
guy?
probably this
Yeah,
is
that
not
would
the
be-
same Josh Gordon of 3 or 4 years ago. Physically,
He didn't
That's
look
on
also
field.
that's also written into the deal when you sign him. We know at this stage of your career we can't count on you beyond week to week.
We've had all 5 of his suspensions on this podcast, and I think almost every time we've asked the question, is this it? Now, because he's not providing production, at least he didn't this year, I feel like he'll get one more chance if he does all the steps. But you're right, maybe he's gone all of next year. I mean, it's sad to see.
Moving on. Mark, let's dig into it. Browns meltdown season is upon us. SZN. Z as in zebra. Z.
Yes, it
In
is.
the UK, I don't know if you guys noticed this, if you deal with any of the people, because we've had our travels to London, which we're very proud of for the Around the NFL podcast. If you are, because my name obviously has a Z in it, if you have to spell your name to a front office, front desk receptionist during a check-in process, it's like, how do you spell that now? HANZUS. They just go Z straight up. I don't know anything about it.
Sounds like an evil cult.
Now, this has happened in many different places, or
It's popped up repeatedly when
Okay.
I've dealt with
in
Brits.
the United Kingdom.
Yes, Brits, and spelling my name when they're repeating it back. Z.
it's one of the many reasons you hate leaving this country.
I love going to London, I'll tell you that. We don't need to do all this flying all over the world, though. I'm already on record on that. If it's like, oh, let's do an Around the NFL podcast world tour. I was like,
I'm in.
Yeah, put me on the old screen.
You know, you would refuse to go
No,
on that trip.
I'll be right
Free
here.
world travel. No, not for me.
No.
No, not for me.
You put me live via satellite.
Like that gentleman on the
the
Mexican
Trend Zone
podcast,
guy.
the Trend Zone.
Some
podcast,
people think
yeah.
that accumulating new experiences in different cultures is a valuable thing in life.
Can help you grow.
Some people do. Not everyone
Some
apparently
people
does feel that way.
value the idea of consistency and spending time with family. I don't need to be globetrotting at this time of my life. I need to be a father and a provider.
You
a
could
husband.
take them with you.
Now we're just getting ridiculous. Where's the education structure?
The
I just mean in the
education is
off-season,
learning new
yeah.
culture.
That sounds
Yeah, I mean,
chaotic.
that-
also,
That
No,
would,
My kids are trying to learn how to read, Wes. I mean, they're
They
trying to
can
learn
read.
how to multiply. Like Jack's learning how to multiply by 5 right now. I don't want to.
How
What
about
happened to
we
me to happen to him. He needs to learn math.
I think bangers and mash and driving on the left with English language taxis is about as crazy as
How
you wanna
about we
get.
up the ante, teach them how to count to 5 in Mandarin?
And while we're here, I mean, you guys get on me. I don't see a bunch of world travelers in the room with me right now.
No.
Greg goes to Japan, but that's because his wife's family's from there. Mark, you grew up in England. We know. I don't see you globetrotting.
It's a financial.
You went to Mexico last year.
Give me some money. I'll
It's
travel.
ultimately
also-
all finances. Right?
Have multiple children and
Easy
watch
excuse.
your options dry up in terms of world traveling as you wish.
Well, I was just told that children should not be seen as an obstacle.
I was joking.
Just the pleasures of the mind and body and spirit. Go get your own across the Amazon or whatever. That's great.
Greg often is left back at home when his wife takes the kids to Japan. So
About to be
I don't need to go
happening.
to the Amazon. I just want a mountain of Amazon boxes coming to my house every day. My wife getting all this stuff sent to the house. I collect them from the front door so the porch pirates don't get them.
Oh yeah.
That's my life.
Really, you're it's the norm. Like no one really, or most people don't have the means or don't actually get it done. They just think in their head, I would love to travel. That would be so great for my experience, and just wouldn't that be nice? But you don't actually do it. You're just different because you wouldn't even want to regardless.
I would like to go on a trip at some time. My wife and I have talked about going to Ireland for our 10-year anniversary.
Beautiful.
But this idea that, oh, God, go see the world before I die. I see plenty of things.
I think what
you know
it
what?
boils down to, you're a real American, basically.
Yeah, you know what? You got it. We finally hit on what this really is. It's a great country, and it's not a perfect country.
Like I don't want to
but
know what
like
I
it
don't
here.
know.
I like it here.
I like knowing, not knowing.
That was great.
All right.
We turned that whole thing into Dan being a better American than the other three of us.
The Browns are a mess, and let's talk about it real quick here. We'll start with, and this was news to me. I heard this morning. More Browns players, and this was from Mike Silver, who reported per two sources at the Week 15 loss in Arizona. Multiple Browns players yelled toward the Arizona sideline to, quote, come get me, including wide receiver Jarvis Landry. And one takeaway here, they're yelling to the Cardinals sideline? Is it that bad they're trying to get to Arizona?
Feels a bit desperate.
And Jarvis Landry has been, as Mark, you pointed out recently on this podcast, has been one of the bright spots of this team. But it does remind us of all these things entering the season. Yes, all this talent, but there's a lot of combustible things here. Baker loves to talk. The coach is inexperienced. Landry's a guy that runs his mouth. Beckham has always been a guy that talks and gets in the media. And if you put all these guys together, what happens if they don't win? Well, this is what happens. Let's hear from Freddie Kitchens, who was being asked about, yes, these comments, and also Landry having words with him on the sideline during the loss to the Cardinals.
I wouldn't change Jarvis for anything. Jarvis plays the game with passion, which I love. He's tough. He's physical. He wants to win. And when you want to win as badly as Jarvis does, sometimes your emotion gets the best of you. But I don't have a problem with Jarvis. He's one of my favorites, the way he plays the game, him as a person, everything.
And then when you need a leader to step up. Here's Kareem Hunt, who's been on the Browns for 4 or 5 weeks. He's telling the media some guys weren't playing hard against the Cardinals.
There was some plays that everybody didn't leave it. They 110% out there through the whole play, through the whole whistle. And we all got to do that if we want to be successful.
Mark, is this a situation culture-wise where they have to make a change?
Well, I think there's no greater indictment of a coach and a coaching staff than when it's overtly visible to the eye and to teammates, and they're starting to talk about players not putting in the effort no matter what the record is or what the playoff situation is. And, I thought the Browns players were playing hard up to a couple weeks ago, and Kitchens seemed to still be getting a response from these guys, but it's bubbling into, very Brownsian, but new territories of ugliness because of the rather star-studded nature of the roster and the combustible status at this point. You're wondering who will be back. You could point to almost anyone outside of Baker Mayfield. I have no idea, or Myles Garrett. I have no idea if any of them will be back at next season, just because it seems to me that the foundation once again is totally fallen out. And I feel like from the summer I was trying to ring this warning bell of I'm not convinced they're just going to soar into the playoffs just because fans and lots of the media saw that, and there was reasons to be optimistic, but it reminds me of kind of like for Browns fans, it's just how can we hurt you in a different way this time? And as a kid, I would, like, in the middle of have these dreams of like Christmas morning and opening up all these presents, and then suddenly like your mom would shake you, and it would be like March 8th, and it'd be raining out, and Christmas is months away, and it's not any time around the bend. That's how this season feels.
You know what?
It never really arrived.
It reminds me of I think he's a mogul or he's a filthy rich guy living out here in L.A. And it was a big news story recently. I think it was in Malibu. He built this mega mansion that was worth like $50 million, whatever the number was. And he built it without getting the proper coding, and they finished most of the project, and then a court ruling came by, and a judge said, no, this is not safe. This isn't going to work. You have people living below you. Tear it down. And he had to tear down a mansion that he had just built. It's kind of what the Browns are. They built like this mansion, but it was on bad footing and soggy ground, and now they might be staring at a tear down here. And who do you trust to handle what's a very delicate situation right now?
Well, all year I've been hoping for the best for Freddie Kitchens. I think he's a likable guy. But that mansion you talked about, that soggy ground, you keep waiting for him to dry it out and build a solid foundation, and every week it gets soggier and soggier, and parts of the house start slipping away, and it's just slipping all away from him. He has no control over it.
I think you save a lot by just firing Freddie Kitchens and making a good head coaching hire. I think that's the easy solution, which is usually the one that the Browns take, because they don't want to give up on this nucleus. John Dorsey, these are all his players. And I know Freddie Kitchens was his coach too, and there was some talk that he liked the idea of that's a coach where, he can not control, but he's certainly the alpha, John Dorsey, in terms of their relationship. It doesn't mean you can't find a better coach that can sell players who calm down once you get to February, March, April, and all this subsides. I think to me, that's like the easiest way of like, let's keep the team, change the coach, and see what happens.
The only flip side,
because they're not going to fire Dorsey.
No, but from the Cleveland Browns angle, they have tried over and over to fire and then sell you on the next guy, and the person that would be different would be someone like Ron Rivera, who comes in with a decade plus of real experience. I'm not saying that's the person,
but it has to be somebody like that. It's like
right.
It's like there's no Parcells out there.
No.
But you need somebody with a track record that commands respect, that these guys in this volatile locker room will say, we're not going to be running our mouths to the media around this guy. Like,
you just need a good coach.
The Panthers were, like, for all their wins or losses, they were low drama under Rivera, and that's desperately needed for some of these bad teams.
And as much as the Browns have tried everything as far as, hey, we're gonna fire this guy and turn to a new coach, they've also stuck with some guys longer and showed patience, like Hugh Jackson, when maybe he should have been gone a year before that.
Right.
We've seen how quickly you can flip. Like, I mean, in Arizona, their offense went from one of the worst in NFL history to a pretty compelling offense with the number one draft pick, with a new coach.
The name to watch maybe is McCarthy. He's a guy of Super Bowl pedigree. He's a guy that was around for a long time. That I think this year away has done well, and his agent's doing a nice job. He's giving him these little media interviews.
It's a little too obvious.
It's obvious, but it's also who else would fit this bill? Rivera would, McCarthy would. I don't think this is a situation where you go with like an unknown coach and hope it works again.
The only thing I find with McCarthy is that he has ties, obviously, to people in Cleveland's front office,
right?
And they didn't pursue him last offseason.
Right? Like John Dorsey's worked with him,
but it was so different last year.
It was,
but John Dorsey's worked with him directly and didn't even want to talk to him when it was very clear that Mike McCarthy wanted to talk to the Browns.
But it's fair to say that
I just wonder what his opinion of McCarthy is.
Where the Browns were New Year's Day last year when Kitchens had the team humming on offense and Freddie and Baker loved him. Maybe they just weren't even in that mindset, and now they have to open their minds.
One huge X factor, if you get Mike McCarthy, you know who's coming with him? Frank Signetti. He's been working with McCarthy hand in hand.
Frank Signetti.
During this whole
he's in that crew.
Yes, he is.
Somebody to clean up the streets and clean.
He's in the
that
bunker.
May be the thing you need.
He's in the bunker. He's doing security and the coaching film.
Frank Signetti, PI.
If you run a dragnet of candidates, he's your guy.
Well done. Well done. All right, that's what's happening in the news. Let's get epic, Ricky. You know, the great thing about Christopher Bobby Wesseling is he's a tape jockey. He's a tape monkey. He's a tape dog. And when he puts together a list, this is not a slap affair. This is the real stuff. Chris Wesseling's all-decade team. You know I love it, Greg. You know the Pitchfork, Vulture, AV Club. Pump that end-of-decade retrospective into my veins.
I'm with you.
And now we have our own, with Chris Wesseling leading the way, picking the greatest players from this decade as we say goodbye to the 10s and hello to the roaring 20s. They're going to push that angle hard. There was only one roaring 20s. You can't redo the roaring 20s. Come up with a new term.
We don't need another depression either.
No, don't want that either.
Well, I would say what's great about this exercise is you guys are going to help me from having a slap affair here.
Okay, good.
You're going to make sure that everything is vetted, that this runs through you guys, that we kind of agree on who some of the better players are. And let's get it started.
Let's do it. So you sent us the spreadsheet. This is a work in progress. It's going to go up on NFL.com later this week. Ali Bumpori, I'm sure you guys have been going back and forth, chopping it up, the best way to attack this. So we will be part of that process. Why don't we start right at the top? Because there's been, obviously, this has been a golden age, right, Wes, of quarterbacks. So when you were coming to, how does it work, first of all? Is it a first team, second team type thing, or just?
I'm only going to do one team. It feels like a lot more writing to do a first team and a second team.
Fair enough.
Smart.
So it's one quarterback.
One quarterback.
No backup. What if in this hypothetical realm, that quarterback gets mono or something?
Maybe we'll do like a box off to the side where it's
give us a
like
second team.
A written second team,
yes.
but I don't write anything about it.
Or
just
maybe like Mark writes that.
Well, that sounds like an extra assignment.
Right, yeah. Wait, first team, write up. Second team, you just get the name.
Right.
Yeah. So, all right, let's go. Who were your, like, kind of the nominees, the names that were in your mind when you were deciding who will be chosen as the starting quarterback of this team?
Well, right off the bat, you go with Tom Brady for his playoff success. And then I think with Brady, too. I mean, winning so many straight AFC titles or being in that conference title game every year, that weighs a lot for me. Whereas Aaron Rodgers, I believe, played at the highest level, reached the highest level of quarterbacking during the decade. So and then you have Drew Brees with probably the best stats of the decade, but I'm not a stats guy, so I'm not. And then Russell Wilson and Peyton Manning way behind.
So Brady edges Rodgers.
I'm still
you're wrestling.
I'm wrestling.
All right, let's help him.
I need help from you guys.
To me, this would be maybe the simplest position, and clearly I have a bias. But the fact that Tom Brady was outplaying Aaron Rodgers for the second half of this decade, 2016, 17, 18, I think maybe the best 3-year stretch of Tom Brady's career was ages 39 to 41. I would say over that stretch, he was the best quarterback in the league. On balance, and I don't think it was that close, and I think that was some of the worst years of Aaron Rodgers' career. Where
why doesn't the first half of the decade?
It absolutely does, but then you look at what the Patriots were doing in the first, not just that they were in the championship game every single season, but they had the top offense in the league, pretty much starting with Gronk in 2010 through 2019. They have been a top 1, 2.
Gronk's the tight end on the all decade.
It's a top 1, 2, 3 offense every single season, and now the Saints can compete with them as maybe the best offense of the decade, the best passing attack of the decade. But when you combine kind of the individual and the team, I don't think anyone's
Would durability be a factor at all when you look at Aaron Rodgers, who's been lost to?
No.
Okay.
Not as much as the extended slumps and the what's wrong. The multiple times we've had to ask what's wrong with the Packers offense.
Like Brady made the Pro Bowl every single season of the decade.
For me, it's Brady and
Rodgers did not come close.
I think Rodgers' 2011 season is the best quarterback season of the decade.
I think his peaks were higher. I think you could argue he played higher than anyone ever in that mid area of his career. And he wasn't really injury prone. He had a 2013 injury that cost him 7 games, and then 2017 he missed half the season, I think, with the clavicle. But he's played basically every game throughout his career, with the exception of those 2
Just
years.
try to point to a Patriots team that would go 15-1 and then get knocked out of the playoffs in round 1, shockingly. And it's like there are too many, and it's not just on Aaron Rodgers. There's a lot of other things happening there. But there are too many stories like that with the Aaron Rodgers Packers.
I don't see, when you go down that road, it's like swap McCarthy for Belichick and see.
Right, there you go.
Maybe, but to me, the point is Tom Brady over and over and over.
Well, he had the individual, though. Here's the thing. I mean, he won as many MVPs this decade as Rodgers did, right? Or no, wait, he just had the one.
I think he won 2. I think Brady, didn't he win 2010?
Right. So he had the individual stuff. No quarterback looking at this here had more than 2 first-team All-Pros. So it was spread out. Brady had 2, Peyton Manning had 2, Rodgers had 2, Brees had none. And that's, to me, another knock on Brees, unfortunately, is he's very often the second and third, but doesn't have those seasons either in the Super Bowl or where he's number 1.
My vote is Brady begrudgingly because Rodgers the past 3 seasons.
That's pretty much where I fall
It
down.
hasn't been where I think it needs to be to close out that type of debate.
I would have said, 3 years ago it would have been Rodgers, I think.
Brady's our guy.
All right, let's move on to the running back position. What do we got? So who
I mean,
who are the
listen to
names?
this music. Are you jealous, Collinsworth and Belichick? Please.
Mike
Number
Lombardi.
100.
Burning with jealousy, are they?
Who we want to
You're
fight
not going to find Dutch Clark on this team.
Will Brinson.
That's our feud.
Billy Brinson.
I don't think
Where's your epic
running
music?
back is like a no-brainer. I haven't gotten to the stage where I've compared all the statistical breakdowns or anything like that. To me, I was just going by, in my mind, it's Adrian Peterson. But he gets docked a little bit because a few of his best seasons were before 2010 started. But I have Adrian Peterson as the running back and Marshawn Lynch as the flex.
Ooh.
Wait, what is flex in real world
So
discussion?
I'm doing this like the All-Pro team where flex is like your best either running back, wide receiver.
Oh, is that
or
a thing in
tight end.
All-Pro? I
Okay.
didn't even know.
Yes, there's a flex
Good to
on the
know.
All-Pro team now. Instead of having a third receiver or a second running back, you can have a flex.
Is that also, I just want to make sure we're within regulations, when the NFL releases their all-decade teams, do they have a similar setup?
I have no idea, but if they go with a fullback, I don't really care what they do. I'm not putting a fullback on my
Right. It's like,
all-decade
That is a
team.
fair-
you were
fair
great, Von
response.
to Leach, but
Yeah, you play 17 snaps a game for 10 years. Give
John
me a break.
Kuhn's a millionaire because of this.
well, it's interesting that the one guy when I see him on your list, and you have him on, I think, the second team now, which is a tough one, but it's worth talking about. The guy with the most Pro Bowls by far, tied for the most first-team All-Pros, and the most yards by more than 2,800 yards
I know you're going to say Shady.
is a man by the name of LaShawn McCoy. I just don't
I thought you
think
were
people
going to say Frank Gore.
No,
My God.
people don't think of him that way, and
Come on.
I wouldn't put him because I don't think his peaks and his consistency is maybe quite there. But it is interesting if you just kind of look in his career. That's partly why, timed out perfectly. I mean, the decade years are somewhat arbitrary, and that was his career. But he's got the best numbers of the decade, which is pretty interesting.
He does. He's also, to my mind, an unlikable guy, so that factors in.
You factor personality into
I
it?
do. I factor in whether I factor everything I know about this person.
But you don't really know him, though.
He is.
I know enough about him to know I don't like him.
I know he's bad at organizing parties. I know there are instances and reported instances of treating people poorly.
Yes. I don't like
But
when
is like
other people-
OJ on your all-time team in the 70s? And if he is, you got to put LaShawn in the – you can't dock
I mean,
LaShawn.
if you're voting in 1980, you're voting for O.J. Simpson. You don't know about what's going to happen in 1994 or whatever.
Well answered.
All right. Okay.
Wes, I do have one question. When you look at all these running backs, and you got 10 or 11 here, Frank Gore doesn't make the collection of them at all.
Well, honestly, like I said, I haven't gotten that far into the research. I went and looked at all the All-Pro guys, and he never was an All-Pro, so that's probably why he's not on
Isn't
this
it weird?
list.
You have David Johnson here, and it just reminded me, and I was working on the power rankings, and we saw how Kenyon Drake had 4 touchdowns, and it comes after David Johnson speaks out against his role. It's crazy that he is an outsider on the Arizona Cardinals, and he's like 28 years old.
Won't be
or
on that team
27
next
years
year.
old.
I
Pretty
think
amazing.
David Johnson is not going to come close to making this team.
I
I
think-
just put
Yeah.
him there.
Right. I mean, if you're putting David Johnson on your long list, then Gore is not, obviously.
I just saw him added.
It's-
Wes just added
Yeah,
him
see,
in
we
tab.
Well,
are
it's just-
all looking at these
but
on a
it-
Google spreadsheet,
it-
and he's live adding. I
It
like
points out that Frank Gore didn't make an All-Pro team. He would be second, by the way, in that yards from scrimmage. Him and McCoy are 1 and 2 in terms of Frank started the most games, and McCoy would be second. The guy who's third on the list in yards, though, I think is worth mentioning, which is Matt Forte, which is I know he didn't finish out the decade that strong, and obviously wasn't playing the last couple of years, but Adrian Peterson's production the last couple of years isn't really worthy of. It's not the reason why you're putting him on this list. And Forte was right there in terms of
But
an every
Peterson
year
was a
guy.
better back.
Right.
Just flat out
If
better.
you're just choosing one guy, he's just in the mix, is what I'm saying.
That 2008 draft class was phenomenal at running back. He had Jamal Charles, Chris Johnson, Ray Rice, Matt Forte. I think that was Darren McFadden, Jonathan Stewart.
Marshawn.
Well, that said, if Wes publishes this on NFL.com and one of the two running backs named is Matt Forte, people are going to freak out. So it's like,
Really? I don't
like
see.
Matt
I don't think.
Forte.
I
as
think
one of the two backs
I
of the
think-
entire decade.
I think
No.
you could make a case that Forte would be right there. To me, it would be Peterson, but Forte would be there with McCoy
If you tried to make a
Charles.
case for Matt Forte on the All-Decade team, I don't think I would read your writing anymore.
And if you told me
Who's number 2 then? That's what I mean. Who's your number 2?
Marshawn Lynch.
Marshawn.
Okay.
Who, postseason success does count for a lot.
Okay.
if you would have told me 2 years ago that Le'Veon Bell would not be on this list and he would not make the cut and he didn't have any major knee injury or anything like that, I would have been like, how is that possible? Because his production and what he was doing for that Steelers team. But these have been a rough 2 years. He sat out a year and then has had an awful year with the Jets.
Yeah, next time you think about trying to hold out for more money, think about your All-Decade spot, buddy.
Bang, you got banged. All right, let's move to wide receivers.
Well, this is another one where there's an unlikable guy, so I'll have to get over that.
I see that. So
But the first two guys
who
that jumped in my mind were Julio Jones, number 1. I think he's a given. Antonio Brown, number 2. And then Dez Bryant was actually the third guy I thought of.
Really?
Dez Bryant,
yeah, he was
the
great,
years
Dez.
line up until the last couple.
Calvin Johnson is probably a victim of that. His career kind of crossed over the 2 decades, right?
Yes, and
Been gone for a while.
retiring early.
Right, but
Yeah.
he's still amazingly 6th, according to Pro Football Reference, in the decade in yards, despite not playing the second half of the decade. Which,
Greg, I'm going to have to get you to forward me this link of all decades.
well, I'm just searching. I'll show you how to search, and just search by game started.
Gotcha.
And Antonio Brown, to me, it would be an easy pick. I think he's one of the greatest wide receivers in NFL history.
Also
point
quit on
blank.
2 different teams, which is a factor for me.
Yes, but I can't argue with the two you picked. I don't know how you can really push someone else in there.
What about
Fitz,
Like
but
A.J. Green, I could have no problem putting him over Antonio Brown.
Fitzgerald.
Here's the thing, though. I guess I would count all of Brown. I would count the first 7 or 8 years where you weren't having money problems with Antonio Brown and not knock him at all for those.
No,
And
I won't knock him for those.
He's the best.
What about DeAndre Hopkins? He's been in the league since 2013. He's arguably the best wide receiver in the league right now. He's been doing it for years. I think he should be in the conversation. I don't know if you put him ahead of either of those guys, but the fact that Antonio Brown's out of football at age 30.
Would you have DeAndre Hopkins over, say, A.J. Green?
I personally would. I would rather
Green
have him on my
has
team.
a few more years.
I think that's a good conversation. I think if you went with Hopkins over Green, I don't think people could kill you for that.
I will say Hopkins is a
they're
special
close.
case where he's played with a tangled mess of quarterbacks before the current one and
A.J. Green
continued
has
to
played
produce.
for a tangled mess of an organization.
Well, it's not just over A.J. Green.
I think
but
they're
mean-
very close. I think they probably would be my third, and you could go either way.
How do you feel about Dez?
I wouldn't have Dez.
He
that
fell off
high.
so hard. That's the only thing with Dez, and I love Dez, that he was such a great, exciting, dynamic guy from 22 to 28 or so, and then, the injuries kind of caught up with him, and then he was out of the league by, age 31?
I don't think he was quite as complete. Like if you were just starting.
Right,
a
but
team-
touchdowns are really
team-
important,
team from
and who was
scratch.
better at touchdowns than Dez Bryant?
He was a badass in the red zone.
You know what's
Absolutely.
amazingly a top 5 receiver this decade in yards is Demaryius Thomas.
Well, he's on
not
the list,
that
yeah.
not that we would put him on this team, but just impressive.
Tight end feels obviously maybe the biggest no-brainer on the list.
I believe it is the biggest no-brainer on the list.
Rob Gronkowski, and Jimmy Graham is a ideal number 2 guy, I think, even though he's fallen on hard times in his early 30s. But when he was Jimmy Graham, like going back to Drew Brees for a second, he has better numbers than anyone in the history of the league. How many true star pass catchers did he play with in his career? Michael Thomas is one right now, and Jimmy Graham in his
Marcus
prime was
Colston?
the other guy. Colston was a great receiver. That is one of the things that I attribute as a additional trait to Brees, that he wasn't lined with stock talent as much. But Graham certainly was, I think.
Well, yeah, and it helps he started in 2010. Travis Kelce's pretty close for me to sniffing Jimmy Graham, but as the
Yes.
second guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're all playing for second place.
Where do you want to go, Greg? Where do you want to go to next in this? Do we want to get into line play?
Let's get into we don't have all the time in the world. Let's go to pass rushers, defensive end.
Can I say one quick thing about the line? Looking at the people that you named, it is insane when you look at how bad the Browns have been that they have Joe Thomas, Alex Mack, Mitchell Schwartz, and Joel Bitonio on this list. And at one point, 3 of them played together consistently.
Not all the first teams.
No, but I mean we're looking.
Yeah.
There's 15, 16 linemen here tops, and 4 of them from the same team at one point.
Yep.
Utter absurdity.
Utter absurdity.
Richie Incognito on your spreadsheet. I mean, going off your clause of being a good person, that's a little messy.
Yeah, I'm happy for him where he's at in his life now, what he's come back from. A lot of it, most of it, you would say what he's done to himself. But yeah, he has no possibility of making the final all-decade.
Dan's all about this good person.
Yeah,
it's on my radar.
For completists, you have Joe Thomas, Zach Martin, Marshall Yonda, Marquise Pouncey, and a right tackle to be named later, penciled in.
Well, I might go with 2 left tackles.
Yeah, maybe throw Tyron Smith.
I think it'll probably be Tyron Smith and Joe Thomas.
Jason Peters, it'd be tough to leave him off, but I wouldn't. I get it.
Here's the other no-brainer that to me rivals Gronk is J.J. Watt is one of your edge rushers. Von Miller
Absolutely.
on the other side.
Yes.
Yep.
And it's funny because you think edge pass rushing, there would be a lot of other choices, but to me, those are your Von Miller. I don't know if he's underrated, but to me, he's a no-doubter on this team. I
think Justin Houston's underrated.
As good as Justin Houston and Wake and Cameron Jordan, you have Pierre-Paul and Julius Peppers. I mean, to me, it's Miller and Watt pretty clearly.
What's Clowney doing on this list?
He's just hanging out in the periphery looking in the window.
That's what he does.
If our fans could see it, it's like listeners.
He's like the 12th.
Wes has like 12 or 13 people listed. So
Clowney, he sneaks in there. He's limping in with a bad knee.
As I said,
a couple ice packs on him.
This list came purely from looking at first and second team All-Pros and then writing their names down on the spreadsheet.
It is on this shared document. Why do I not have permission to type in this document while we're doing this?
I will give you permission.
Yeah, I already had permission.
How?
Scientists, the lab stuff.
It's a lab scenario.
Okay. You also had Cameron Wake and Justin Houston in the mix. Terrell Suggs, on the subject of Suggs, he was one of the great beasts early in this decade, and as we talked about, he's still serviceable even at age 37. Maybe a little Suggs, but then you're back to the good guy, bad guy.
Well, I don't think anyone on his team's ever had a problem with Terrell Suggs.
Oh, some people.
Well, are you allowed to?
Yeah, I think some people in his private life have had significant problems.
Yes, I think that's a fair comment.
Some people have gotten away with a lot.
Mm-hmm.
We're also getting into my definition of bad person
right,
versus
we don't need
other
to,
people's definitions.
We don't need to do that.
Well, I guess it's just subjective.
Right. I have a very strict code.
Okay.
Thank you.
Somehow Suggs slips by that code.
I didn't say that.
Well,
I will call up an article and send it to you. You tell me if he should.
Well, he's buried on the 4th or 5th team here, so you're just.
He has no chance.
Still in your locker room. He's still in your locker room.
All right, that's my fault. I want to stay on topic here. Let's move to the interior and another no-brainer, Aaron Donald.
Yeah, I know he didn't come into the league until 2014 or so, but he has dominated to such a level that I don't think you can have a list without him.
He could retire after this season and he would make the Hall of Fame. I don't even think there's a question.
Yeah. 5 years ago, Ndamukong Suh you would think would be a slam dunk to be on the top of this list, but he's ever since he went to Miami, it seems like he never really caught. He was never. Maybe if you look at the analytics of it all, he was still the same guy, but that seemed to take a bite out of his. I don't know, his stock in some way.
Bad team, more money.
Yeah, your second interior lineman seems like it's totally wide open, Wes.
No, it's not.
It's not.
Geno Atkins has it pretty firmly.
Okay.
His years line up. He entered in 2010. It is now 2019. He has spent his entire career in the decade. And for me, there were years where Aaron Donald wasn't in the league yet or wasn't dominant yet, and the best defensive tackle was Geno Atkins, not Ndamukong Suh.
That's fair, but all of Suh's career also lines up, and he's been either first or second team, whether it's Associated
Some of that's
Press.
by reputation.
Right, but almost, throughout the decade, 2010, 11, 12, 13, through 15, 16, 17, not just Pro Bowls, like Pro Football Focus, second teams. Like, I could listen to Geno, and I maybe would go with you.
If Geno didn't play for the Bengals, everyone would consider him a no-brainer for this spot.
Moving to linebacker, what a 1-2 punch here. 1-2-3 punch. You got Luke Kuechly, Bobby Wagner, Levante David. A name that jumps out, you have second on the middle linebacker, Patrick Willis.
Oh, yeah.
Who is one of the great, what-ifs in the NFL. An absolute monster. His first 5 years, I think he had 4 All-Pro picks, something insane of that level, and then suffers one of the grossest knee injuries ever.
That was Navarro Bowman.
Oh, I'm thinking of Bowman. That's a bad job.
But Willis, an early retirement.
Willis
by all
retired.
accounts.
Willis did retire.
With the foot injuries.
Yes. And he also had 3 seasons where he was the best middle linebacker in football before the decade started. So he gets a little banged by that.
And Bowman is on the list as well here. But, yeah, his career was cut short, but it was an amazing start to his career.
Could you make a list that goes from like 2005 to 2015 as like a second project?
That would be fun.
Some of these guys
idea.
on the cusp.
So, Wagner, it is interesting to think of Wagner as an all-decades player, but he absolutely is. It is. Levante David might be among the most surprising names, I think, to most people that would be, at least for now, in your first team.
But are you surprised by it?
No, because I'm looking at the other options and trying to think who you would put in place of him. And
any Snake Lee fans out there?
Look how many people dominate from the NFC West.
Thomas Davis would certainly be an option. You could make a case. You can make a case for Thomas Davis. You could make a case for Donta Hightower, certainly. But I think you might be right on David. I think David, I would agree with you.
Cornerbacks, you have Richard Sherman and Patrick Peterson. Now, I just want to say one thing, Wes, that I am okay with you not putting Darrelle Revis on this as long as he's in your previous iteration of this list, the aughts version of your all-decade team. He get that number 1 spot?
He's banged by being a cusp player because he comes into the league in 2007 and wasn't 2009 the great all-time year?
His all-time stretch was 08, 09, 010, and he was still 10. He was still elite in 11, and then he got hurt in 12. So, yes, he straddles it, but I feel like this whole industry needs to be torn down if he doesn't get on one of these lists because no one was better in that stretch.
You are
maybe
preaching
ever
to the choir, and Charles Woodson should never have won that Defensive Player of the Year.
That's the bigger issue. I would imagine that bothers him more than not making this list. No, Wes, it's a very good list. But just Darrelle Revis may not be as concerned about that.
You could still, if you wanted to, make the case that, okay, he doesn't have as many seasons, but he has 3 first-team All-Pros in this decade, so that ties him actually with Peterson and Sherman. No other person has 1.
Let's talk about this. So you're not replacing Sherman or Peterson probably, but what if you put him at the defensive back spot instead of Chris Harris?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I would do that. Well, Harris
I would because
quietly been consistent.
That's why, when I saw Levante David, I was like, "Isn't there someone with a better peak?" Because
But David's underrated.
I'm all about someone like Revis. And I think the fact that he won a Super Bowl and was the first team All-Pro that year with the Patriots, people kind of think, oh, that was late career Revis. He had very good at least top 5 cornerback. He got the first team All-Pro. He won a title.
Aqib Talib's got a pretty strong case.
I would counter back, Wes, because I don't that DB spot. It seems like a consolation. Let's bump Patrick Peterson down to DB and give Revis that second.
Isn't Patrick Peterson first team All-Pro his entire career just about?
I'm just saying, I feel like whoever gets that DB slot.
Well, the guy who only played a few years
it's
in
third place. It's the bronze medal.
It's very clearly third place. But
right, that's where I think Revis belongs because of the years. He just banged by his
You can't put Sherman there. He can't play on the inside. He's not
But Wes,
flexible.
you are
It's
the
a compliment.
king. You're king of the eye test, and I need people
Revis
like
is
you.
number 1 on the eye test.
But I need people like you, people that really know their stuff, to let the people know. I know his peak wasn't as long as you wanted to. I know that he got banged by the carryover, but you cannot leave this guy off a list like this because he was that great.
Okay, well, that factors in, and that will probably I will
people need you, Wes.
In the article, I'm going to say he's
Dan
on here because of Dan's passionate advocation, which makes sense to me. You're coming to the right guy with the right argument.
All right, good. Punter, love it. Johnny Hecker, bang. Thomas Morstead, who's still there in New Orleans.
By the way,
the damn
Johnny Hecker, last week in that debacle against the Cowboys, just a maestro performance for a punter.
What about
just
this?
Fantastic.
He needed that because it has not been his best year.
No.
we've skipped a position here unless we're going to keep that as a surprise.
Last but not least.
Hecker's the greatest punter of all time, so he's getting it.
Safety.
They're talking about kicker.
No.
Earl Thomas and Eric Berry you have penciled in with
Well,
Harrison Smith, Eric Weddle, Devin McCourty all looming.
I would say Earl is impermanent marker.
Yeah.
Barry is penciled in. I could hear arguments for Weddle, McCourty, Harrison Smith, Malcolm Jenkins.
Miko's not going to like that you have Brent buried at the cornerback position.
I think I would put McCourty and Harrison Smith
Not for
over
nothing.
Eric Berry because Eric Berry's just didn't have, even the seasons he played, a couple of them were marred by returning from injury and he wasn't quite a dominant player, whereas he had like 2 really dominant great seasons, but it's the whole decade where McCourty's great throughout and Harrison Smith stacked together a lot of good years. I might lean Harrison Smith.
You could argue, one could argue that the greatest accomplishment in that group was Eric Berry returning from cancer to play at an all-pro level.
Strong argument.
Nice, Wes.
Now, I mean, what am I going to argue against the cancer argument?
Yeah,
try
it's
it.
just like
That carries a little more
That
weight
can
with
be
me.
your article.
imagine like Wes in like the Hall of Fame room and he brings up that argument. Like, okay, day's over. Just put Barry right in.
No, I think you have to factor everything in. That is one great accomplishment that he has.
And his peaks are higher. He has 3 first-team All-Pros. Weddle had a couple. Harrison Smith surprisingly only had 1. And then McCourty's kind of that compiler. That's just why like Harrison Smith splits the difference a little bit where the peaks are good.
But Harrison Smith, how many years has he played in the decade?
2012 was his rookie year.
Okay. So he's been most of the decade.
And finally, the most important position to hit. I mean, this is easier than Gronk. This is easier than Aaron Donald. This is easier than any position in my mind. Justin Tucker, not just the best kicker of this decade, arguably, maybe not so arguably, maybe inarguably the greatest kicker in NFL history is your kicker of the decade.
I still believe Gronk is the easiest choice, but Justin Tucker is probably the second easiest choice.
I'm thinking you waive even the 5-year Hall of Fame waiting period for
Sure.
Tucker when he hangs it up in 10 years or whatever.
Who would be second then? The Ghost? Steven Gostkowski?
Is that what they call him?
Sometimes, yeah, a little bit. Ghost.
He was second on my list, which did no research, just
Prater.
guessing.
Does Tucker, he's had a few missed extra points of late. Is it because he's so unconcerned about his status on this list that he can make a few mistakes at this point and still just glide right in?
Tucker is kind of like a preseason pitcher. He's out here trying things because he's kind of bored. He's like, let me try a new spin to see if this works.
He played traditional rock, and now he's playing jazz.
Yes. I think that's well said.
Yeah.
He's at a different level. He's trying things that these other kickers hasn't even entered their mind yet.
Belichick did call him the greatest kicker in NFL history.
Case
So did
closed.
John
Of
Harbaugh.
course, he also called Joe Mixon the best running back in the NFL last week. So that's
He also said Hecker was like the greatest punter.
Yes.
So this is all checking out.
it makes sense because they are better than ever before.
And if we're looking for a feud, we still have that Matt Prater situation as well, Mark.
There are so many ways to go with the feud scenario here.
Remember my Al Leiter feud?
Your Al Leiter feud,
Yeah, Al
also from might have been the same media
screw that jerk.
day. Al Leiter butting in front of West to get some availability.
Butting in front of everyone because he's Al Leiter.
Right.
I was a lefty and
Wes-
shut the
Wes
Reds
and Super-
down in a postseason game.
West and Super Bowl Media Day, not exactly the marriage.
Not a great
made for each other
marriage.
there.
Here's my feud.
Just through the entire media night industry. I mean, when they went from media day to opening night, that was one of the darkest days in the NFL.
That was I feel like
that's
there
when
are,
I stopped going.
There are
Couldn't do
other
it
events on the horizon that are going to be going through some tinkering and changes, according to various reports, that could add new waves of annoyance to our life.
On opening night?
Potentially in Indianapolis for the Combine, based on what we're hearing. So
I don't think that affects us. But they're going to blow that thing out too. All right. Blowing out another podcast. Plugs. Power rankings are up. Check it out. If you want to see where your team is. The debrief. What do we lead with on the debrief this week?
The Gilmore T.J. Watt Defensive Player of the Year debate. At least I narrowed it down to those two at the top. The Coach of the Year debate, I think, is also wide open. You could probably make a case for 4 different guys. Harbaugh, Mike Tomlin, Kyle Shanahan. Who am I forgetting?
Sean Payton?
Only now
Sean
I'm
Payton,
realizing.
that's it.
Bill
yeah.
Belichick?
It's pretty wide open.
Yeah. Now I realize when you were pitching this as a topic, it was the actual awards, not making up awards.
Yeah. Because it's like 2 weeks
Would have
left.
been a good seg today.
Well, we could certainly.
Let's do it
hit
right
that
now.
down.
All right, let's get to
No.
No. Places to be.
Defensive Player of the Year is pretty wide open. We can talk about it next week.
Okay.
All right.
Stick a pin in it. And Mark, long form part 2. Well, not really a long form. This is your diary of your trip to Oakland. Which
It was as long as the other one. It felt like a long. I mean, these don't. I didn't write it in 12 minutes, but it was fun to write because it was just like I wrote it in a notebook the whole day, and come back and.
That's fun. I've done the diaries before. It's
enjoyable.
a fun little.
Yeah.
It's not as hard a write because you're just kind of dumping out what you were. It's more your mind.
Stream
Well,
of
it's also it's like
consciousness.
no one can argue with what I say. I saw when I was not being.
Right.
I didn't have the Patriots taping crew monitoring me during this, so there's no footage of what I saw or didn't see. But it is true what I wrote.
And I just
A very strange.
it makes you suspect a lot.
Right.
No, it's entirely true. I mean, I only wrote what I saw.
It was like
so,
there couldn't have been no one would even know if I murdered a small.
No, I'm just
kid
saying
that
versus
day.
like an
It's
an-
like who would know? There's not any proof of that.
Versus
There's
like
no,
an analytical piece. What can anyone say? What can they say? There's no argument.
ranks
That's the
high
best
for you.
kind of thing to write.
Remember
Don't
the
come at
plot
me with
line in
it.
the last season of The Wire where the reporter made up a serial killer
right.
to somehow keep a paper afloat? I don't know what was the backstory. There's a possibility now in my mind that you have some fictitious elements to the story.
Well, that is not just in case anyone is listening of authority level. No, there's nothing in here that's not true. But that's
What
an
if there
interesting-
was?
It did kind of
Who would
remind
know?
me of though, like in a TV show, and
There you
it's,
go.
it's like an investigation, and they bring in a really secondary figure that they just want some background, and then they just start talking and totally implicate themselves, and they're like, "Wait a second, did this guy do it?"
And
Oh man.
one final thought for me is that I want everyone to know, just if we're going to talk about this, that I did also fly to Cancun, Mexico for spring break 01. So if you want to say I'm not worldly,
I don't think Cancun counts as
You
world.
can't be contained inside the United States with your
Cancun.
desire to experience other cultures.
01. What a week it was.
You went to the Panama City of Mexico, and that's worldly?
No, just putting it out there. I mean, if you want to go
Well, there's-
country for country, I bet I'm not trailing you guys by too much. Is what I'm saying. I got Mexico. I got
I've been in
Canada.
Italy and Germany, by
I got
the way.
the U.S. I got England. I got Ireland. So I'm sure you guys aren't lapping me in this competition, and you're all older than me. So
I did a whole thing where you just kind of
got so
backpacked around
personal.
Europe, so that was a volume trip for me.
Oh, that's-
so that's gonna take.
That's
you
a nice
out.
job.
That's gonna take.
that's a
you out.
nice job by you.
It's gonna take you out. But yes, the best way to experience international culture is
Television.
with hundreds of drunk Americans in a
Television.
cloistered scenario
All right.
resort.
I'm just putting it out there. I got Mexico.
All right.
But
Well,
we've all been to Mexico.
There's many parts of Mexico. It's not just like one.
Well, tell me
Hey.
about it as you've traveled, with a
I would
donkey
love
across
to
that
travel
country.
more often.
No,
You obviously have a great history and knowledge of the nation based on your commentary there.
I would love to travel to all parts of Mexico and really all parts of the
So
world.
what you guys are getting on me more is just that I'm not saying I'd love to do it as well.
Right.
That's what I was pointing out. Was
yeah.
like all anyone else says is that they'd like to, because no one really.
It would be
really
easy
gets
for
to
me
do
just
it.
to
Yeah.
say, yeah, I'm the same way. But
I'd also say
I'm just
that-
keeping it real. That's
but
all.
getting on you, we've let the topic go multiple
You
times.
brought it
and
up.
You continue to bring it up, so we're
Sure,
not.
it's a
this
bit.
isn't really
It's a
our
bit.
hammer that's dropped.
But it is. I've heard a lot from Mexican people. Just like the best way to experience their culture is Cancun spring break.
Oh, so
Like,
whenever
No
you
doubt.
go to Senor Frogs.
No doubt.
That's just like if you really want to know the inside story. That's it.
The best way to experience any Mexico area is find the local Senor Frogs and have a good time. All right. Ricky's worldly.
Ricky's
you
got
want
the
me to-
right
Wake
idea.
up, Ricky.
No, I started pressing it, and then I wasn't sure if you were asking me about because
No.
in the past year I've
Ricky.
done what Ireland, Scotland, UK,
You got the right idea.
Portugal, Spain.
You also have that connection to the airline industry, which is really helping you in this, right?
Not with the international
No.
trips.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah,
That's true.
yeah. So
But she knows the ins and outs and
What have you.
in
She is a
betweens.
traveler.
She's got that guap.
She got that guap. She got that New England blue blood guap.
okay, here we go.
Dripping in the studio. Both sides of the glass. Stan Hanzus signing off for a Quiet Storm. The mailman, the old boss. And Ricky Hollywood dripping behind the glass.